could walk them through talking about like keyboard. Good. Give me 30 seconds.
Hello. Welcome to San Diego Python. You are in the right place. I'm sorry it was probably hard to find, unless you are a Qualcomm employee, in which case you knew exactly where to go. But that's okay. Anyway, thank you for coming. This is our first time back here. We were last in this auditorium in February 2020. So here we are back again, 2.5 years later, and a little change. And the world's different, and whatever. But thank you for coming. And there's going to be some great Python tonight. So hopefully everything goes well. First, I wanna thank a few people. I want to thank Qualcomm, and specifically the engineering development team, formerly the Learning Center. They're basically allowed us to be here tonight and host our event and everything like that. So big thanks to them. And I want to thank my co-organizer Diane, who helps wrangle all the speakers and gets all the speakers set up. If you want to be an organizer at San Diego Python sort of runs on organizers. In terms of this meetup doesn't have money. It just runs on the people who show up every month and do things. So if you want to be an organizer, please get in touch. We're always looking for organizers. There are stickers out the door and masks if you want to get those. So if you want to grab stickers on your way out, or there's tons of like Django Con stickers and masks, please grab one. Please wear a mask in here. We're trying to keep everybody from getting COVID while we still do Python stuff. I want to talk about our website, SanDiegoPython.org. That has links to the latest meetups. It has a link to join our Discord. It has a link to our YouTube channel, which this is live streaming to. Hopefully that works. I don't know if it actually will. We'll find out. Our code of conduct is on there, and stuff like that. So please check it out. And if you're joining our live stream from somewhere other than San Diego, please post in the chat where you're coming from. We always love to see that. Everybody who's in the room with me is obviously in San Diego, so that's cool. I want to talk about some conferences, both upcoming and ones that passed. Some of the people in this room and myself went to DjangoCon US, which was in Mission Valley. That's like 10 miles south of here. That was last week. It was great. It was great to be back in person. It was about a 300-person big Python conference in town. Not anywhere near as big as PyCon US, but a great Python conference. Speakers were great. The venue was great. It won't be in San Diego next year. They said North Carolina, so hopefully you can make it out there next time. But it was a great conference. I did want to talk about PyCascades. We'll be in Vancouver, Canada. It'll be in the spring. The date's not finalized, so check that out. Watch their stuff. PyCascades is sort of the unofficial Python conference of San Diego because I feel like there isn't one in San Diego, so we all go to PyCascades. It's a great one. PyTexas is April 1st and 2nd. It's in Austin. It's also in person. And PyCon US will be April 19th to 27th in Salt Lake City. So check that out. I also wanted to mention that there will be a State of DevOps event in San Diego. It's over at AleSmith on Miramar. It's on November 9th at 5:30. I think that's a Wednesday. I'm not 100% sure. But you can, if you search for State of DevOps, it's a tour, so there's a bunch of events. Look for the one in San Diego, you'll get it. And it's on Eventbrite, and the tickets are free. You don't have to pay for it. I think you just show up, meet and greet with other people. If you're coming for your company and you want to pitch people, I think they try to get money from those people. But if you just want to show up, no problem. So check it out. Cool. And I also wanted to, I'll post the link to becoming a speaker into the live chat, or somebody else will in a little bit. But you too can be a speaker. We're always looking for speakers every month. It's just a 5 to 7 minute talk. You'll make it. You'll survive. We're looking for talks at all skill levels, whether it's a beginner talk or an advanced talk. We have a range of skill levels tonight, so please check it out. And so I'll post the link into the chat. But if you want to be a speaker, you can get in touch with me or click the link in the live chat, and you can just sign up for either the next meetup or a future meetup if that doesn't work for you. And if the world doesn't fall apart, between now and the end of the year, we should be in this room through March. So, on the 4th Thursday of the month, except for, and this is my last announcement, except for November and December, where we do the 3rd Thursday of the month, because the 4th Thursday of the month in both of those is sort of holiday-ish. So we're skipping, we're going from 4th Thursday, which is our usual timeline, to 3rd Thursday, just for the next 2 months, and then in January we'll be back to 4th Thursday. All of these should be in this room, so great. I also want to thank our sponsor, JFrog. That's a DevOps platform for continuous releases. They do fantastic. If you need to run like a PyPI inside your company firewall, they have a product for that. It does other things besides PyPI, but that's the one that we care about. So I just wanted to mention that. Awesome. Without further ado, I'm going to pass off to our first speaker, which is Jay Miller. Jay's going to talk to us about how to get better issues for your project. It's a little bit of a longer talk. It's probably going to be more like 15 minutes. So Jay, I'll let you take it away. Thank you. And I'm going to leave your phone.
They haven't announced it yet, but I just want to also throw out there, North Bay Python. You go to their website, it might be happening soon, so be on the lookout for that. Hi everybody, I'm Jay Miller. I do stuff around the internet. I do podcasts, I do other things. I apparently also watch the stream while giving the presentation. That's probably not healthy. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about a thing I've already prepared to see a lot over the next several months. 10 minutes, 5 minutes isn't enough time to talk about all the things that I want to talk about with this, so I had to start with this is like the 101 class, and it'll make sense in just a second. So I'm presenting and showing slides. That's also weird. So we're going to be talking about issue template forms, or as I like to call it, how to actually get the things that you want when you want somebody to file an issue on a project. And the reason why these things are kind of important to me are, oh my goodness, I did not turn off animations. You know, for me, I actually do this whole podcast called Python Community News. I think it's actually where David got all of those conference announcements from, because we have a newsletter that talks about all of the conferences that are coming up in the Python community. We also talk about the news in the Python community. This will be the only Python podcast that will probably talk about Elon Musk buying Twitter, because hey, that's where everybody's at. We got to figure out whether we're staying, whether we're going, where people can't even go, or what they can do with that. But if you want to learn more about that, you can hit the QR code there. It should take you to the podcast or the YouTube channel. I think it's the YouTube channel. But the way that we do the show is we actually get all of our content from users, from listeners, from people that say, hey, I heard some cool news, and I want to make sure that it's covered on the show. And the way that we do that is we have people do what most developers do whenever they want to let somebody know about something. We have them file an issue. So this is going to be a little bit of a beginner talk, because I got to make sure everybody's on the same page. For the next several months, I'll be walking through the entire workflow process of how we go from idea to content to show. We got to start with idea. So GitHub issues are a way for people to log suggestions for your code. Maybe they're ideas, maybe they're comments, maybe they're bugs that they think are bugs that are not bugs, maybe it's intended consequence of whatever user action is, but it is a way to collect a history of the things that happen or the things you want to happen with a code base. And, you know, that's great. However, when most people are on a project and they want to file an issue, if they go to GitHub, they're stuck with this, you know, nothing. You got a blank canvas. You know, who are the assignees? What are the labels should I use? I don't even know what labels are available until I start clicking on things. Should it be a project? Should it be a milestone? Do I even have access to those things? Whether you're working with your own project or someone else's, you have a lot of decisions that have to be made from the start, and the majority of these projects start at this, base 0. In fact, there's a whole list of things that you can do to make your project more comfortable for other people. We're not going to talk about those, though. If you want to learn more about those things, come reach out to me. I've actually created like VS Code extensions to help people do those things. Now, GitHub saw that this was a problem, and they decided, well, we're going to make templates. We're going to make it easy for people to create some starting point for users when they want to file an issue. And those are okay. They're basically marked down with some front matter up top, and you say, this is the name, this is what I want to do, and here's, you know, a glorified README for an issue that people have to then go in and fill out, and then you're there. Now this is better because it gives people some starting point. I can do things like add labels, I can add assignees and things like that. I can even give them a default title and work with all of those things, and that's good. However, there's no enforcement of any of the stuff that I do. If I want to go through and just cancel all of the stuff in the body and then change it to fit whatever I want to write, that's possible. And that's actually probable, because most people are like, what is Markdown? I don't want to have to read it, process it, delete it, add what I want, then go to the next line and keep doing that. And that becomes kind of tedious. So GitHub, which actually I should have mentioned, I work for Microsoft. Microsoft owns GitHub. This isn't a promotion for you to use GitHub. This is just what we use, so I'm showing you how. I should have done that at the beginning, so I'm sorry for that. But GitHub decided to do something about that that's a little bit better. And they decided, there we go, to use YAML, which when I say something better and then I say YAML, I feel like I'm making fun of myself. But what they did was they made it so that you could use YAML, and instead of a markdown that's easily erasable and doesn't really enforce it, you now get this. You get an actual form that people can fill out. It has sections. It has things that actually have to be filled out for the issue to be committed. Like you can't actually send the issue if certain things are labeled as required and not filled out. That's great because one of the things that we often require is for people to agree to our code of conduct to make sure that they're not going to publish any topics that are maybe promote harassment or anything like that. So if you don't want to sign the code of conduct, that's fine. You're just not getting your topic talked about. So there's that. And the issue never gets filed, but also you get the same features such as labels and all these other things. So now that I've spent the 5 minutes that I was originally allotted just explaining how we get there, I want to show you how we make them. And don't worry, I'm not doing any live code because that's dangerous. So the first thing is the top level, and this is all YAML. So your top level is going to be all of your basic information. This is your description, this is, you know, the name, the title, labels, assignees, all those things that go in the side corner, and that's great. We're going to gloss over that pretty quickly. If you're not familiar with YAML, I'm going to give you a resource that you can use to actually make these using VS Code. Again, another product my employer makes, Microsoft, that I actually do get paid to talk about. So then you have the body, and you actually define it like that. You say body, and then you start going through each of the rows that you want to create. So you have body, type, input. You can give it an ID. ID doesn't actually do anything, but it is required. Hopefully there's going to be something new at GitHub Universe that talks about how you can work with that more. But you can put things like input boxes, you can put things like, you know, text areas, drop downs, and check boxes, and I'm going to go through all of those things. I want to at least give you an example of what some of this stuff looks like. And yeah, it's all there. And hopefully that's readable. If it's not, someone let me know, and I'll make sure the slides in the future are a little bit more readable for folks. So let's start at the top. You have input. An input is just a simple line of like, hey, what is a thing? We use it for our URLs. Hey, what's the URL for the site? When was this site created? Unfortunately, it doesn't work with any type of rich data, so you can't do like, this is a date, but you can say, hey, give me a string, and then you can go and process that string later. That's actually what we use. We use date utils to like parse whatever date they give us and turn that into actual date code. Future talks there. But then, from there you can add whatever, like I said, you can put that validations required true to make sure that what they're putting in there is valid. I think required is like the only validation they have currently, but again, they've left themselves a lot of room to add more validations in the future. Next is the text area. A lot like an input, just bigger. It actually does take markdown as well. So if someone wants to get fancy with their text, they can get fancy with their text. There is a thing in here that we're not going to cover, which is the markdown field. You're going to only use that if you have something that you want to send to other people and you don't want them to interact with it. So that, I didn't really include that in this talk. But this text area allows them to put things like what happens when you use this. Add images, add video, add a GIF. Do whatever you want in this box that's isolated there. And again, you can do all the same validations that come with an input field. The next one is a drop-down. You might have particular things that you want them to enter. You know, what version of operating system are you using? What version of Python are you using? If you put Python 2 in there, then maybe you can tell it to automatically delete that issue and tell them time's passed. Let's move on. So for this, I like this because you can say like, you know, what type of conference is it? They have a choice. They're not limited. That means you can standardize on all of this stuff, which is how we can take issues, put them in other issues, and then process those issues to make a newsletter. If we always know what we're going to get, we can then start putting in actions to deal with data reliably. And the last one, checkboxes. It's kind of like that. You just put type checkboxes, give it an ID and all that stuff. But again, these are just boxes. Do you want your name mentioned on the podcast? We have it so that if they don't check that box, instead of putting their GitHub name on it, it says anonymous. Even though if you were really interested, you could go to the GitHub issue, and of course their name is there. They kind of know that when they did it. But we want to give them informed consent to actually say their name on our show. Hey, this person submitted this topic. So if they have to check the box, we believe in opt-in, not opt-out. And again, you have that requirement there of like you have to read the code of conduct. We even put a link to the code of conduct in the actual description of the text. And again, all of this takes markdown, so you can design it and style it however you want. And lastly, I kind of mentioned this. You want some resources. There is pretty good documentation. I created a little short link, aka.ms/github-issue-forms. That's going to take you to the documentation on GitHub, and that'll let you go wild in YAML. Also, I will say there's a VS Code extension that does YAML. It's Red Hat. It's really good. And the reason I say it's really good is that if you don't format your YAML, the code will not work. And you want to know that before you actually commit that. And then you're going into your template and you're like, why is my template not working? Or why am I just getting a flat YAML file instead of an actual thing? That being said, that is it. And I'm guessing we're not doing questions, right? Or anything like that?
You can do questions.
I mean, I can do questions if you have them.
I'll type the questions if people.
So is the content that you can specify within the text area to formatting RST text format, or what kind of text?
It's Markdown. So I think it only works with Markdown. Any other questions? No? All right, well, thank you very much. And I don't know who's next.
I'll hop in. It's Hobson.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jay. Great job. All right, our next speaker, thanks Jay, that was fantastic. Our next speaker is Hobson Lane, who's going to talk to us about Agile machine learning. So, awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully we have no AV issues. So hopefully this thing just works. Oh, that's a framework laptop. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you like it? Hopefully the magic happens.
Now, I've got to get to the right screen. Why is it not just... well, that's going to be tricky.
You should be able to full screen it.
Problem is, I can't see it from here because I've got something. Oh, I know what I'll do.
You do have these if you want it. Well, yeah.
Here. So I can see the notes. And y'all can see the slides. Sorry. Almost. That's visible enough?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got, let's see. Okay, we talk about Agile machine learning to build better bots, and obviously you know where you are. So I'm going to talk about some things called functions and mappings, and I'm going to show you some examples, obviously, in Python, and then how a model is a lot like a function, and a mapping is a lot like the data you use to create that function, and in machine learning. And a classifier is a model, and category labels are the data that you need to feed into that model that, in order to train it to get to do what you want it to do. And then I'm going to talk about understanding text and training a model on text. So these are all those terminologies. Again, one new learning that can train these functions to understand text, and that's how you build better bots. If you can have a machine that can actually understand text. Okay, the math JAX is not rendering very well, but what's a function? So in your algebra class, you might have seen something look a little bit better than this, but it would be f of x equals m times x plus b would be a typical one. And in Python, you might write a function with a def and have your m equals 2 and your b equals 3, and then compute your y and then return that y. Obviously, you can make that a lot more compact. Does anybody recognize this function, the y equals m times x plus b? Exactly. What's the shape of this function? It's a line. Oops, it didn't actually share the answer there. But Yes, it's a line. And so that's a typical machine learning problem, a linear regression. Obviously, you have a much more complicated X and Y when you're trying to deal with text. This is another way to implement, well, this is an example of a particular function where you've chosen a slope of 2 and an intercept of 3. So it's got a line like this, shifted up a little bit away from the axis. And so you can call that function and you get back a bunch of answers. And we're going to call, not very useful when you're just using numbers like this. But let's talk about what a mapping is. Maybe, has anybody heard of that term, mapping? Anybody know what mapping means? Trey, I know you do. Does anybody know where you would find the base class called mapping in Python? And what is it used for? What's the base class behind dictionaries and ordered dictionaries? So if you ever wanted to say is instance and you want to find out whether it's any kind of mapping, like a dictionary or an ordered dictionary, then you'd use that base class or abstract base class. I'm not sure where it is anymore. It used to be, it could have been ABC or collections, but anyway.
ABC.collections.
Okay, it's both now. Okay, so what's a model? So a model is a function that can learn those parameters from a mapping. So you give it a mapping that says, hey, what do the parameters of the function need to be? So what are parameters? A number that gives the shape of the function. So whether it's a slope of 2 or a slope of 3 or a slope of 1, that tells you what the shape of that function is going to be when the parameters decide what that is. So some examples are that m and the b, which were 2 and 3 in the previous examples. Obviously, if you're using PEP8 and trying to be more explicit about your names, you'd call them slope and intercept. So you can see how a model would require probably a class, because it would need to do 2 things. You need to be able to run the function, and you need to be able to fit the function. So you would do, so all these scikit-learn functions, all these scikit-learn classes for models, no matter how sophisticated they are or simple they all have a dot fit method. And so you call it with a bunch of data, a bunch of x values and y values that are zipped together, and it runs through them and tries to guess what the parameters should be and tries to get it closer and closer and closer to that data that you passed it in. And so that's how you fit it, and then once you're done fitting it, the actual calling of the function is a method called predict, because that's what machine learning is all about. You're trying to predict stuff. And in our case, we're going to try to predict what the class is of text. So that line function, that's predicting a continuous value. A classifier is a model that predicts just a discrete value, like 1, 2, 3, 4, that can't be anything, it can't be 1.5, it could be one of those discrete values, or like true or false, or yes or no. And so we're gonna predict the class of some text like yes, yep, why, and yup, and we want them to all be classified as yes. We want to give it that particular discrete label for those things. So we can build a chatbot that responds to when people say yes. And so that's it. I'm going to do a quick demo of that. Oh, this is going to be trickier now that I've got 2 screens to work with. But I'm going to go to an API that we have. I'm going to go to my tag is machine assisted intent tagger. So those class labels, those are called intents, because you're trying to guess what the intent is of your user who's visiting your chatbot. Come on. Okay, let's see if I can go through my history
to Quantum Hall access point?
Yeah, I should be connected to the internet. Well, I'm not. Good call. I'll just quickly connect to mine. And no wonder it wasn't rendering correctly. There we go. Now we'll get connected. Anyway, now let's see if we can go to that. Come on. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a phone that we built using a machine learning model that is really sophisticated. It's built on the same stuff that you've heard about at may have to call off the live demo if this doesn't come up shortly. I might in just a second. Welcome home. Coming up now. Maybe we'll have better luck. Let's turn off the VPN. That'll help. Never mind. Okay. Time for. Maybe I'll do it after somebody else gets a chance to go, so I don't waste your time.
You want to take questions before, or?
Sure, go ahead. If you have questions.
Anybody have? Nobody? Thank you, Hobson. That was great, other than, the Wi-Fi, obviously. Our next speaker is Trey, who's going to talk to us about syntax error, invalid syntax, which seems sort of redundant. Yeah, Trey's going to talk to us all about that, and see how it goes. Yeah. Take it away, Trey.
Wait until he's connected to verify.
Yep.
So we have a slightly bumpy start.
It'll show up on the TV.
Python quiz. What's the latest version of Python? 3.11. Good job.
They keep changing.
3.11 dot what?
Zero.
I think it's 0. Yeah, it's still 0.
All right. Is it okay? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So who has seen this error message before? Yeah, we've all seen this error message before. This invalid syntax message, it's a lot less common in newer versions of Python. Here's an invalid syntax error message in Python 3.9. It shows that there's an error on line 2. In Python 3.10, the same error shows an error on line 1 instead. And the error message is a lot more helpful. It says that there wasn't a parenthesis that was closed. So this is a lot more helpful than what you got before. Before it did point you to about the right place, but not quite the right place. And the message is just far more helpful than invalid syntax, which tells you nothing. Also 3.9. Here's an invalid syntax error. Do you want to see what's wrong here? Yeah, very common mistake, missing colon at the end of a line. In 3.10, it just tells you, I expected a colon, because Python knows that you expected a colon there. So Python 3.10 and above, they're great at catching missing colons. They're also great at catching this, which is really cryptic. You have no idea what's going on here. I have no idea what's going on here. The number 4 is somehow wrong. It's actually not the number 4, it's the line above, the number 3. We forgot a comma. So we're inside a list, we don't have commas between the items in our list, and there's a hint to that in the actual error message. Now, newer versions of Python have improved the error messages a lot, but this invalid syntax error message, it will never disappear completely. This is essentially Python's way of saying, I know that this is valid code, but I'm not sure what advice to give you. I know this is wrong, and I don't really know even why it's wrong. Anyone see what's wrong here?
There's no colon lines up.
So it's the closing square bracket is missing. We have print, there isn't a closing square bracket. We've got 2 lines of code running into each other. What about here? Same issue, yeah, we're missing a closing square bracket for our return. So this is an error message. There's no context here. We just know that invalid syntax, perhaps you forgot a comma on line 10. Line 10 is the one just below the 4 there, 1 dot right. Anyone see what's going on here? There's a lot of code. It's hard to spot it. Yeah, you're very fast at counting parentheses. We didn't close the parentheses, that's right. It took me a while to figure out what was going on here. It's not my code, that's code I saw on the internet. So the common issue in all these cases is unmatched parentheses, brackets, and braces. Now, this is a very common issue that newer versions of Python often point out correctly, but not always. Those invalid syntax errors were actually in this version of Python 3.11. What about here? You want to see what's wrong?
Missing a plus.
Missing a plus. Yeah, that was quick. So it's either a quote or a plus, right? It's missing in this case.
Quotes?
Yeah, we're missing quotes. Same thing here. Lambda is not a valid variable name. And also we've got a quote inside. So quotes are a very common problem with invalid syntax. Whether it's missing quotes, extra quotes, or quotes inside of quotes that are the same type of quote that are unspaced. What about here? Anyone want to explain this? You know why it's wrong, right? But what's the reason it's wrong? It's kind of hard to explain these things. So all of these have a common problem. We've got a return result equals something. You can't return and do an assignment on the same line of code. Here we've got, what's the problem here? Anyone see it? It is return related.
No, you have a return inside of
Return inside a return, right? We have a return inside of our list comprehension here. So in all of these, we're using a statement as if it's an expression. Statements have to stand on their own. Statements can't be embedded in statements, but expressions can be. An expression returns something, you can stick it inside another expression, you can stick it inside a statement. Statements in Python have to stand on their own. This is a very common issue with invalid syntax, with Python not knowing what's going on. What's the issue? Yeah, derf, def. What about here? This one I had to squint at for a moment. It seems like it's too short. Yeah, when we start comprehension, we're missing the for in. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is what we had instead. So we're missing a little bit of syntax here. Here, we're assigning class to a variable. Class isn't a valid variable name in Python. It's a reserved word. Here. Come from Node, this one will frustrate you.
You have it backwards.
Right. In Node.js, it looks kind of like this. In Python, it doesn't look like this. It's from something import. Oop, I apparently have to log into a hotspot. Just a second. There we go. So the common problem in this case is either misspelled, missing, or misplaced keywords, or using reserved words as if they're variable names, which we can't do in Python. What about here?
Missing a second underscore.
Space after the T.
Right. Our second underscore is off on its own. There's a space in between our 2 underscores. What about here?
Missing a space.
It's the opposite problem, right? We're missing the space right after def, between def and that def underscore in net. What is it here?
Your else is
Right, it's interesting. This isn't an indentation error. This is a syntax error because Python couldn't figure out that this is in fact an indentation error. So it just said syntax error invalid syntax. So it's common for white space to be an extra, whether it's extra white space, missing white space, or incorrect indentation, which sometimes give you an indentation error, but not always. Here, you want to see what the issue is? This is a funny one.
Missing enter.
Right, this is a REPL-specific issue. So when you're at the Python REPL, the Python Interactive Interpreter, you have to put a line break after every block of code when it's the outermost block to end it. We didn't do that here. This is what we meant to do. That's what we did instead. We need that extra line break after our def. What about here? We're at the Python REPL.
Yeah, you can't call Python from the REPL.
We can't call Python from in the Python REPL. We meant to be at our system command line. Also here, we have a .py file that has these greater than signs in it. We copy paste it from our REPL. That's not valid Python code. It's REPL output, it's not valid Python code. So the Python REPL doesn't act quite the same way as a Python file does, and it doesn't act the same way as your system command prompt. Whether it's blank lines that are missing or extra blank lines, or running system commands from your Python REPL, or copy pasting your REPL output into a .py file, or the opposite, which can actually cause those line break errors. These are very common problems with that invalid syntax error as well. So my students hit that dreaded invalid syntax error, which is really nothing outside of something went wrong and I can't parse your code. These are the most common causes. And these are not all the causes, these are just the ones that I see most often. I will be writing an article on this soon, so if you miss something, please message me on the Discord and I'll share a link to the article once it's published. If you want a Python morsel sticker, come find me. I have lots of them because I haven't been to conferences in a long time. Thank you.
Do you want to take questions?
Yeah, I can do questions. If anyone has questions. I don't know how many questions you'll have on syntax error invalid syntax.
I mean, not necessarily a question, but it would be nice to see, for example, some feature where the interpreter itself, well, you know, building or parsing the code can build some ML algorithm to identify the code structure of the user to try to improve the actual detection
Right.
of the error.
So Python 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, 3.11, each version of Python recently has been improving these error messages. Part of those, some of those are very simple, like the missing colon, that was a very easy one for them to identify. Some of these are getting a lot more sophisticated. I'm very impressed by some of the things you're missing within an F string. They're, very interesting. None of them are using machine learning models. I do wonder how they would embed that into Python without adding a bunch of complexity to Python itself. But that would be really interesting to see. Maybe they could use the models when finding the common errors and not, necessarily at runtime. But I like what they do. Other questions? All right. David, do you want me to switch over yours?
Yeah, please.
Do you mind if it's on that screen?
That's fine.
Okay, because it's not set up on your.
That's fine.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Trey. And I'm going to talk to you about introducing ML to your Django app. This is the talk I gave previously at DjangoCon. To people on the live stream, I tried to boost the audio. It was already at the max, so I've tried an artificial gain, but we'll see how it goes. So thank you for bearing with us with the AV issues. I know the color's off too. Very cool. So I'm David. I in addition to organizing San Diego Python, I do Django. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I integrated a little bit of machine learning into a Django app over the last 2 months. Just a little bit about me. I work at Read the Docs. I'm not big on social media. You email me. My background is in development. So the big thing here is I'm not a data scientist and barely understand data science. I do understand the absolute basics of machine learning, but not much more than that. I've never really done anything like this. And in my day job, I mostly work in advertising. We'll talk about it a little bit. So I wanted to use a little bit of machine learning in our advertising. So ads pay the bills at Read the Docs. Read the Docs is a documentation hosting platform, but advertising pays the bills. We built Ethical Ads, an ad platform that targets to content rather than to users. And we built our own ad server because we went to a bunch of ad companies and asked them if they did sort of ads that didn't target based on users and didn't target user data, and they sort of said no. And we wanted to respect people's privacy and not just do things that aren't yet illegal. So we built our own. We target ads to content, not people. And to do this, we basically needed to understand pages where our ad is showing, so we can show the best ad, because basically ads that perform well are ads that are well targeted. So essentially, my goal here is to distill a web page down to like the topics that an advertiser might want to buy. So if I took the Django documentation, for example, I might say, okay, this is about Django, Python, backend web development, those kinds of like big topics. And an advertiser might say, okay, I want to reach Django developers in the United States or something, and buy advertising based on that. We started with very simple heuristics, how frequently a word, what words appeared, how frequently, that kind of thing. It worked okay. It wasn't really a model, but this is sort of the absolute basics of a model. We ended up with something called Spacey, which is a big Python project. It's popular in text and machine learning processing. And we built sort of a multi-classifier that can classify a web page into topics. It's trained on high hundreds of web pages, mostly on Read the Docs, but a few from elsewhere. And right now it only trains to about 8 topics, but we hope to expand that to about 100, which is a very good number. And since we only focus on developers, we're not selling advertising against everything, we're only focusing on developer advertising, we thought, okay, maybe this is good enough. So that's what we built. You can actually try it yourself. You can go to this bit.ly link and sort of try it out. It works best if you type in a lot of characters. If you just type in like 5 words, it's going to do extremely poorly because it's trained on large bodies of text, which would be on like documentation web pages. Also, if you just like paste stuff in from the New York Times about, say, war in Ukraine or conflict at the border or whatever, like it's going to do very poorly because none of that stuff was in the training set at all. But if you pass it like a developer web page, it actually does pretty well into distilling into one of the topics that we have. Sort of outputs like a probability for each one. But it actually did like pretty well. We sort of trained, we ran like a test set against this, and it's well over 90%. So it's actually doing pretty well. My recommendation is to start simple with your Django app. Adding something like this into a Django app, like this little bit of text is enough to do the very basics of sort of text classification. Now, I'm throwing in a pre-trained model here, but even if you used an off-the-shelf model, which something like Spacey would include, it'll do pretty well. Our trained model does better against our data set. But yeah, and text-to-see, which is the module that you see me importing here, this is actually just a pre-processing and post-processing library for Spacey. So, it can remove white space and distill things into categories, makes the return value a little bit better. But I would always choose sort of a library off the shelf, and especially if you can, choose a model off the shelf rather than training your own, because this will make the setup really simple, and I would suggest starting extremely simple. I had to, and I'll explain some of the problems that we ran into on my next slide. So if you're doing something like clustering, use something like scikit-learn, use something like PyTorch for a lot of classification, especially if you're doing stuff with audio or video. Start really small. Most of your time is going to be spent, unless you have a pre-trained model, it's going to be spent, in like going through hundreds of records and classifying each one manually so that you could train your records very well. So again, like unless you want to do hundreds of records of classification yourself, start with something pre-trained if you can. The questions to ask yourself is machine learning appropriate to my problem? If your problem has to do with probability, if you're sort of making probabilistic judgments based on data, machine learning is probably a fit. There's probably a way to do this if you're making sort of a probabilistic judgment. So, it can work pretty well. Training your own model is a bunch of work, but it also will give you better performance if there's not a data set out there that really matches what you're doing. The training is slow. We started with like a CPU trained model. We eventually went to like a GPU trained model. The GPU trained model trains in like an hour. But the runtime is pretty fast. The runtime is about 5 seconds. So on a long piece of data, it can be more like 80 seconds. But like you have to be careful. Do I want to do this in a web request? Is this something that I'm doing in a background task like celery, something like that? You have to be very careful. Is it fast enough to be done in an Ajax call? There are trade-offs you can make here to have a model that runs faster in runtime or with less memory or things like that, but it's going to have lower accuracy. So these are also the trade-offs that you can make. I did want to mention, memory requirements can be very large. So you have to be very careful. The model that I'm using, the runtime memory requirements are in the gigabytes. So like, don't run this in a celery task that you've spawned 8 subprocesses for, because you will run out of memory unless you have an unlimited budget for this kind of thing. So be careful. If you've spawned 8 webs and you're doing these in web requests, if something takes gigabytes in one process, it will take that times 8 in multiple processes. Many processes were killed to bring you this message, so be careful. Even after your model is ready, expect to spend some time, like a pretty good amount of time, getting it into your production setup. That's okay. This is natural, and it's just part of this. I would say if I were to break down the time, like 50% of the time is spent on getting my data ready, and then a little bit of time was spent on training, not that much, and then maybe about a quarter of the time was on operationalizing, maybe even more, maybe closer to like 40%. So between the like getting the data ready and operationalizing things, that is the majority of the time for me, at least so far. But the performance has been good. This slide just has some helpful things. Basically go forth, add machine learning to your Django app. Use something off the shelf. It's great. There's great tools out this. The tutorials are fantastic compared to where they were like 5 years ago. 5 years ago, this was a very dense topic. It was hard to get started. I felt like I sort of had to have a little bit more of a background in machine learning than I had anyway. But now the tutorials are great, and you can get started. If you have data, you can get started. Or if you can get data, you can get started. So that's my talk. Are there any questions or questions in the chat? If anybody wants to relay those to me. Any questions in the audience? Yeah, go ahead.
So I like the idea of like processing the text. Well, first of all, ethical advertising is a great idea, but it's kind of reminding me of search in the very beginning. Because in the beginning of search, you were just processing the pages, and then Google figured out, hey, if you like look at how pages relate to other pages, that information is useful. So it seems like you could almost build up, in addition to this, a parallel thing. But instead of ranking pages based on a search query, you have a different criteria, like ranking it according to like click likelihood or the value to the advertiser. So I don't know, it seems like for the same problem, you could probably leverage that as well as the machine learning. For the future of advertising.
Yeah, just to relay this for the chat, the question is mostly about how PageRank and advertising, classifying under advertising relate together. I guess what I'll say is you are correct. In the early days of search, like, PageRank was like a monumental breakthrough. For search advertising, it was not mostly. So search advertising started very simple, and to this day actually is mostly pretty simple, where it's like, does this key phrase or keywords appear? Show ad. Literally Google is a $100 billion business with basically zero machine learning. So, search ads don't necessarily have to use tracking, but they probably do work a little better, and certainly retargeting works very effectively for advertising, which ethical ads doesn't do, because it essentially means you've collected data on millions of people in order to do that correctly. But long story short, you're correct. I don't know how much PageRank is actually used in advertising targeting, but it's certainly used in search ranking.
It seems like you might actually have a different ranking for advertising and search. Like you wouldn't necessarily get the same rank.
I think you're right. So again, advertising and search being different, but yeah, I agree with you essentially. Like you probably could leverage the pages that link in or the pages that link out in order to do additional sort of topic classification. So I do tend to agree with you there. And I can assure you that ad networks are definitely calculating in the likelihood of somebody clicking on an ad into whether they show an ad or not. In fact, if the click rate is too low, many of these ad platforms will just not show your ad at all because it's not worth enough money to them. Any other questions? Go ahead.
The keywords that your model spits out, are they a controlled dictionary or are they completely open?
Great question. So the question was, are the keywords that my model spits out completely open, or is there sort of a finite number? There is a finite number. Right now, we're literally classifying web pages into something like 8 topics or a lack of any topic that, like, it cannot match any of the topics. The actual output is a numerical probability, like, 0 to 1 on, for each topic, does this page, how relatable to this topic is this page? So for each one, you can say, okay, do I think this page is about data science? I think this page is about data science with 10% probability. Do I think this is about back-end web development? 99% probability, so on and so forth. And then sort of we can look at those numbers and make a decision based on this. Right now, we're only doing like 8, but I hope to ramp up to about 100. But essentially, to do 100, if I want 50 to 100 samples on each of my topics in order to get a good sample that the machine learning model can learn on, for 100 topics, 100 samples, you're talking about 10,000 manually classified web pages, which right now is a lot for me. So I'm not there yet, but I hope to ramp up. And one of the things that I can do is sort of, there's a couple tricks here, like training the model and then running the model against, like training the model a little bit so that it's okay against a topic, then running it against a big corpus, finding the ones that it classifies, and then you can just sort of verify that the model found those correctly. And if it did, then you add them to the training and test sets.
Because I have a vocabulary about 240 keywords. How expensive would that be to train them?
I don't think the training cost would be that high. I think the problem is going to be getting a representative training and test set, like a data set to train it against. At least for me, that would be a big problem. So, like, can a classifier classify 240 distinct values? Yes, definitely. It will work fine. But will getting the data set to train that against be challenging? It might be. So I guess that would be what I would say about that.
Could you augment your data to make it look like a new label?
So the question was, could I augment my data to look like a new label? What do you mean by that?
So let's say if you have an actual source that talks about backend development, could you change keywords in that, like a fake, to now make it look like something else, and then use that as a training?
Got it. So the question was, could I modify data in the training set to train it against other things? I would probably advise against that because it's trying, like, if basically the way that these models work, you're sort of based off of an existing language model, and then you're sort of training the last little bit of it. So it already knows things like parts of speech, nouns, and it sort of already knows things like, I mean, maybe it knows about Python web development beforehand, but like the words that would be used in, say, Python web development, like even you can't just change 5 words in a big multi-paragraph document and have something reasonable, because probably all the other words talk about Python web development. And so I think you'd confuse the model. I think it would be worse than not doing that. I'd just use a half-trained model, point it against more data, and then manually verify those. Or if you're Google, you farm that out to other people as CAPTCHAs. Any other questions?
Can I ask one more?
One more
It's
question.
a very interesting topic. What if, I just brainstormed here, what if you train on the websites themselves? So instead of writing out a middle kind of classification, but you could be, you actually get real-time data from this. It's like, from this web page, the click-through rate for all of these different ads, that's live information. You could be feeding that back, and then gathering that data, instead of, it's like, you're training ads to match websites, not classifications, and you'll be gaining all that data real time. You don't have to do any manual classification yourself, and it should just grow and strengthen as it goes on. When you receive a new ad, your classifier would say like, oh, I bet it's the best
Got it.
That can, you mind?
Go ahead.
I think what you can say is that that's a little bit less ethical, because what you're training on will create clickbait, because the click-through rates will be higher on potential clickbait articles and titles and people that have done SEO on their page to cause you to click on that ad. And so, and it may not at all be related to the actual thing that you searched for and you were browsing on Read the Docs.
So I'm going to say a couple of things here. First, the question was basically, can you train it against the websites themselves? And then the response from another audience member was sort of, yes, but you might, like, if you look mostly at click-through rates, you're gonna direct to perhaps clickbait articles and stuff like that. I think those are both true, but I do think that there is an interesting tidbit here, which is one of the things that you propose is sort of training the opposite way, rather than classifying the topics that we sell to advertisers. Training, basically, you could take the ads themselves, take the words that the advertisers use, take the words on the advertiser's landing page that they want the ad to go to, and then say, what are the best web pages to show this ad on? So I do think that that's kind of interesting. We're not doing that yet, but it is a thing that we have talked about. Last call for questions, because I don't want to. Yeah, one more. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No worries.
The thing is, do you think that by collecting less data, you can handle less efficiently the click fraud? Because for Google AdWords, click fraud is a really big matter. So I've been working a bit on this question, so I would like to have your input.
Okay, so the question was about ad fraud. It is a real question. It doesn't have anything to do with this machine learning model, which is about topic classification. But fraud and click fraud is that is a great topic for machine learning models generally, because basically it's a probabilistic judgment, like I talked about, where is this click fraudulent? We handle click fraud in a variety of ways. We have a bunch of things that we look for, not necessarily related to click, but we do look at that. But also, we're just much smaller. We can, rather than Google, where anybody can just sign up and start hosting ads and start clicking on ads, like on Google AdWords and Google AdSense, we have a much more narrow set of publishers. We talk to every single one of them before their ads go live. We check their site every month to make sure everything is looking good. We run their sites through a bunch of scanners to make sure that the traffic is real. So there's a bunch of additional things that we do, but we have not yet trained a machine learning model to detect fraud. But I can tell you that our fraud rates are much lower than everybody else's in the marketplace. So I can tell you without a doubt, I have advertisers tell me, Google tells me I get this click-through rate, but when I check my analytics, this is the real number of people who came to my site. And those two numbers don't match. And when I talk to advertisers, they say your numbers, which are lower, admittedly, pretty much match up with what my analytics says. So but I attribute that not to some magic that we're doing, but just the size and the nature of our business. All right, so I don't want to take up any more time. Hobson, did you want to give a demo? Were you ready to do that? Do you want to do that, or should we wrap it up?
Give it a shot.
All right, Hobson's gonna give it a shot. Trey, should I give you your laptop back? Or you Trey, why don't you grab your laptop and Hobson, you set up, and well, hopefully this works. Thanks, David. Thanks myself.
Jesus, my.
Yeah.
It just froze on me just when I said yes. There are no other speakers.
The screen's not up yet.
It's my computer's booting up.
It's not on this thing yet, so it's, the problem isn't here yet.
One problem with the framework is you can open it up and replace parts, so there's a lot of clearance between the parts and the case. If you pick up the case, it sometimes shorts stuff out.
Oh, something's happening.
Yeah, it's booting.
Got it.
Just trying to get the display is working a little bit. Mirror them. That way we can all see the same stuff. Get rid of our new Discord. Let's get rid of the VPN. And let's get LibreWolf going. Problem is the local Wi-Fi logon page.
I don't think the Qualcomm Hall one has a login page.
It requires you to confirm that you're,
Oh, okay.
at least it was for me. And so sometimes you turn it off and never mind.
I consider a hotspot.
Try that as well. SSL here fail because I'm switching networks.
This looks like a Cloudflare page, though. You'd have to be connected for that to happen.
No, it's connected to the internet. It's just it's going through the router and I don't know. Next time I'll take screenshots and not try to do it live.
Yeah.
No worries. Let me know if you want to give up. It's not.
I'm
Oh, maybe the magic's happening.
turn off, go away. Mozilla, please. There we go. Okay.
Hey, this is the VPN's
So
fault.
this is just a Django REST framework. Did you use that, David, for your API?
Yes.
Awesome. Let's refresh this page one more time so I can get the full. There we go. Let's do it again. Okay, here we go. So you put in an utterance like yes, and you get back that label like what they were describing. Come on. So it gives you, just like David described, it gives you the confidence score. So you can say yes. You can also say yup, and it'll still come back with yes. You can say why, and it'll come back with yes. This is so you can ask somebody a question, and it'll keep coming back with the right answer. You can even say yes sirree. And I tried yes sirree Bob, and it didn't work, but yes sirree did work. We'll see what confidence it gets. It got for yup, it got 94% confidence. That's probably one that's in our data set, but it's still got yes, but it's only 74% confident. You can put longer utterances, and so this is for a bot called Maya that's helping prevent child trafficking, helping to educate teenagers. And so there's the whole purpose of this project, MyTag, is to be able to handle new questions from the user. So they ask Maya, what are you for? Or somebody comes in and starts doing some trolling. And we've come up with a technique that will automatically give that thing a label and then forward it to we don't yet have it plugged up, where it will then send a message to the labelers, or they will be at the top of the queue for the labelers to read that response and decide if it's something that the bot needs to learn how to reply to. Let's see. It can, and so there'll be some unknowns that come back, just like David was talking about. He has an unknown category, and you can see that we have about 30 different intents within the chatbot that it responds to at various points in the dialogue. You play a choose your own adventure game. You choose whether to talk to somebody or not who might be a child trafficker. You're trying to teach teenagers how to interact with people, and so we're gonna add some more free text so that they can actually say something, and then we'll be able to recognize the intent if we can do the labeling efficiency. One of the big problems with chatbots with these rule-based chatbots there's an infinite number of things that people say, and so you need to prioritize those things that you deal with by clustering the ones that are similar to each other and working on all those that you can to get the greatest number of satisfied users of your bot that are getting out of it some value, so that you find, like, if everybody's saying I love you to this bot, then you probably need to have something that educates them. Oh, I'm just a bot, and so I can't really even talk to you much about anything besides child trafficking. So there's lots of opportunity, and it also gives you an idea of what people are using your bot for and what kind of questions they might have about child trafficking, and in some cases you might actually get information about dangerous situations that some people are in the environment that you're in. So a lot of our chatbots are involved in mental health, and so this sort of intent recognition needs to be pretty sophisticated. We need to be able to react in real time, to update, not in real time, but as fast as possible. We need to be able to incorporate new dialogue into the chatbot to handle situations that we haven't anticipated. And so this system is going to enable that. At this point right now, it's just a classic, it's just similar to David's system. All it's doing is classification, which is supervised learning. And so now we're just closing the loop by identifying all those unknowns and then assigning them a label automatically. That's something that very few people do. And we give it a label, and then we, Vish Veshbot, who's was an intern 2 years ago, he's become a really expert NLP engineer for us. And so he's already done a demonstration for us of this algorithm this week. And so we're gonna start deploying it and using it on our chatbot Maya very, very soon. Any questions? A lot of hand waving. But anybody want to say something to the intent classifier? To find out if it can.
Ask it what data it retains.
Yeah, we should have it go to our privacy policy. This should be the privacy policy intent.
Cindy has this one, but Maya, I think, doesn't. Because She gets a lot of I love.
So it knows for sure that that's an unknown thing for
So how do you determine the confidence in that known label? Is it 1 minus confidence in the most?
Well, so we don't have a very broad set of utterances for unknown. It's not yet. It's still in the prototyping phase. But normally we just put a bunch of what's called word salad, a bunch of random words, and label them as unknown and throw them into the unsupervised learning model. And that, because what these little regions, if you think about a meaning as being in a 2-dimensional space, so you got like, I don't know, well, different aspects of meaning could be on different dimensions. It's actually, most of these vectors are like 300 dimensions up to 1,000 dimensions to actually capture the full meaning of a phrase. But if you imagine it in only 2 dimensions, which is the only way you can really think about it, each one of these intents is like a little island, and a space of all the things somebody could say, a little small region, like a sphere or a circle in that space. And so the unknowns is all the ocean around those islands. And so you need to sprinkle examples of what an unknown looks like by throwing in random words and random phrases and calling those unknown. And then you can check to see, okay, so the classifier will then see if it's close to one of those islands, it'll give it a label, and the closer it is to the middle of the island, the average way people express the word yes, or the average way people express who are you or I love you, those little islands, the closer you are to the middle of those islands, the average way people say that, then the higher the confidence is that this is a good label. But if you're out on the edges, then the confidence will be low, and if you're and it'll be low for the unknown as well as the label that it's near. But if you're out in the middle of the ocean, far away from any islands, then the confidence will be high that it's an unknown. Does that answer your question, Maria? Anything else?
Thanks, Hobson.
Awesome. Much easier on me with their questions. I guess they're afraid they'll break my computer probably.
Thank you for coming. That wraps up the main part of our meetup. We can hang around a little bit before we leave, but you gotta be out the door by 9. Like that's what the security people want to know about. So we're out of here by 9. Thank you for coming. I want to thank Qualcomm again, and I want to thank JFrog, our sponsors. I want to thank all the speakers, and you too can become a speaker. I don't have the link right on me, but if you go to sandiegopython.org, there's a thing on there where you can sign up to be a speaker. So please sign up to be a speaker, and I hope to see you next month. It'll be the 3rd Thursday in November. All right, have a good one.
End stream.